Hey everybody, welcome to the forum hosted by the Black Caucus of the Young Democrats of America. I'm Rashad Gaines, your chairman. Tonight joining me, we have Brittany Hagebook, who is the Southeast Region Coordinator for the Black Caucus, Dan Sims from Arkansas, who serves as our South Central Region Coordinator and Vice Chair of our Political Action Committee. Our political director, David Madsen of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Dr. Dory Russ from Jacksonville, Florida. We have some other special guests joining us. They'll be joining us throughout the hour as we discuss the impact of Ferguson, Missouri, in the current state. So we're going to open the floor, Dan. I'm going to let you do the honors and open us up.
Well, okay, I didn't know I was doing that, but good evening to everybody. So glad that you could join us. Can everybody hear me clearly? I want to make sure that I'm projecting. It's been a long day, and with a 1-year-old, I do a lot of stop that, don't touch that, don't stick that in that socket, and so on and so forth. But on a more serious note, I think that we are all very deeply aware of the developments and all of the work and strife that we continue to see in bringing some real closure to this case through means of an indictment. I know the grand jury has still got a very large task ahead of them to make sure that everything is done with due diligence and so that we can see some justice served. In this case. But tonight, what we want to do is kind of get into a discussion of the concept of beyond today. I am an alum of St. Louis University, and so the St. Louis area is very dear to me personally, that's where I really cut my teeth politically in neighborhoods like Ferguson, Oakland, Pine Lawn, a lot of the other adjoining communities that make up North St. Louis County. And as a result, I am very much as a regional director and also someone who's very familiar with what's going on the ground beyond the Mike Brown situation. Want to see a dialogue get started tonight about what happens beyond today. And what I mean by that is now, say, protest and rallies aside, there are some very tangible political action steps that need to take place in order to stop this open season, as we've called it, on Black Men. And it starts with City Hall and a lot of those folks, majority white, in the halls of power that are informing some of the decisions that led to this event. So opening it up to folks, what have some of the strategies and ideas been about how we can actually make sure that this event remains catalytic and getting folks to the polls in November and beyond?
Dan,
Mm-hmm.
are you asking us a
That was a,
question?
that was a I was like, it's like,
Okay, David, jump in.
What is the question again?
So I think that the large question before us tonight that I'm sure will splinter is what are some of the strategies that we as a caucus should employ to keep this event catalytic politically, so we can see tangible political changes take place in Ferguson and around the country, and to kind of get the discussion kicked off. A good foundational idea, as I'm pulling up the post. Svante Myrick, the mayor of Ithaca, New York, has, of course, had some interesting issues with his police force in the city of Ithaca, and yesterday proposed 7 major reform items after a sergeant pulled his weapon on a group of teens. I'm not sure exactly where they were in the city, but in those were a lot of the ideas and strategies that we've heard come out of the Mike Brown case, placing cameras on officers. He is very much a proponent of the residency rule, requiring that members of the police force live within the city within a year of being hired. Creating a community action team that would, I guess, essentially serve as an outside watchdog group to patrol rotations of folks outside that are patrolling the streets, and also creating a social worker model that would work with folks in the area that these police officers are encountering to lower the recurrence of situations that happened, so I guess similar to the case in St. Louis City, where the young man, I can't think of his name at the moment, was killed by police last week, but they knew that he had a history of mental illness. And so would it have been a difference maker if a social worker, based on something that they actually use in Burlington, Vermont, would have, made a difference and could have ended much differently. So kind of taking those things, how do we apply that to Ferguson? Would models like that work? Will it take something a little more dynamic? And then that's where I kind of would think the conversation should start.
Okay, before we go there, we have State Representative Courtney Curtis on with us, who is the state representative for the Ferguson area and parts of St. Louis. Courtney, how are you doing tonight? And can you bring us up to speed on what's going on the ground, as well as the movement that's building there, the vibe, the tone of the city right now? And thank you for taking time out of your day to join us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I do only represent a portion of Ferguson. I represent the portion where the police protesting is taking place, but I grew up on the side where it happened, actually, and I grew up in Ferguson. The mood has changed drastically over the course of the past week. It's a lot more calm at this point in time, but people are organizing a lot more. The gangs are even united at this time to get together so that they can make some drastic changes going forward, or keep the pressure on the police and political structure to get the demands that they have set out. It's likely that we won't get a justice from the prosecuting attorney, so people are cognizant of that and are directing their anger and frustrations to a more organized and energized, method of protesting, if you will. So, I mean, we have the clergy coalition coming together with one thing. There's a big forum in the city of St. Louis right now. Ferguson is right outside of the city of St. Louis and the county, but a lot of things are taking place in the city. And a lot of the frustration on the ground actually came from individuals that actually live in the city, because there's a different political structure there that doesn't cater to the needs of the people. So, I mean, what you see in the protest and what you've seen in the media is not completely accurate. It's not all just Ferguson. It's just general frustrations with the police in general. But there is a lot of movement in the background. It may seem like the movement is dying now, but they're only getting more organized. Coalitions are forming, and people are coming up with their media plans to keep the pressure going on. There will be a demonstration on Friday. There was just a march from the church that everything has been held at recently back to Ground Zero. There's the 2 forums tonight. So, I mean, people are just getting more organized.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, in your opinion, what are some what direction does this need to go in? Period. Whether it's to make sure that this doesn't happen again, politically, changing the tone of or changing the direction of like the elected officials there. What direction does it need to go in to move forward?
I mean, a couple of things need to happen. One, we do need to keep the pressure on because you can't get any change without it. Secondly, we do need a grassroots, organizational movement here and across the county. And, from my perspective, in order to change things and to show that we have the political muscle, the NAACP has been recently organizing, but they've been out of touch for so long that they had a meeting with well over 800 people, and they passed paper around the room to collect people's information. And I mean, that's not a good place to start, but we need to be as efficient as possible and use technology, to our full advantage in order to take control of the situation. And pressure definitely needs to be applied to every political figure that's affected or in some sense of control over the situation so that we can actually get what we want. But outside of St. Louis, we do have to move it to a national level to ensure that this isn't seen as an isolated incident. It is something that's happening across the country if you look at the Eric Garner case and other cases. So we need to put the pressure on, nationally, and be organized as possible.
Awesome. All right. So with that in mind, I guess I kind of want to switch gears and let's talk about two things, well, three things before we end tonight. Let's make sure we hit our take on, the state of police and policing right now in America, including community policing and, this military state that we're kind of in with them. Let's also look at, we can come back to that, that'll be our last point. Let's look at what community organizing means right now, or what we should, where we should be directing the term community organizing, and then civil rights now being known as social justice, and what this looks like going across America. In my mind, it's time for open season on Black America to stop. Open season is not only in the killing of our young men. That would be a very simple thing to say. It's time to stop killing Black boys, and that is definitely true. But open season also includes, hindrances to quality education in our community. It also includes the lack of proper jobs being available to African Americans and other people of color. It's not just a single issue. Yes, the conversation is about police using excessive force, not necessary, harming, people who are innocent or who are defenseless and don't have weapons. But there are other avenues in America where Black people are being hindered from having a quality of life, access to education, access to health care, access to, the opportunity to purchase a home. So there are some other hindrances in Black America that we kind of, need to fix as a community. Brittany, jump in here. How are you tonight? You got to unmute yourself.
Okay. I'm doing well. Okay. I think that, of course, it's these issues as far as the different injustices that take place as far as not only just in the Black community, but I think across the board as well. And of course, as the Black Caucus, we're really going to target our community. But I think the message, it can be spread across the board. And I think that is one thing that can really make sure that this, there's some longevity in it. Because you can have the Black community and center it around us. And that can move us. That can make strides and things of that nature. But you really have to, in order to make it to whereas we can really bring it together and go for the long haul and make sure that it's not just a us thing, and that we're not just the only ones that live here, that we're not the only ones that are in politics or the ones who live within the state of Missouri. That we're having to interact with different cultures, different races, and we all want to be able to have the same opportunities and be able to have the police force, which is not clearly just Black people, but that can just make it to where we can all grow from this and make sure it does have some form of longevity. So I feel that it's important for us to make sure that we incorporate that into our message as well. That it's not just going to be an us thing.
So, okay, so our foreparents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, our pastors, some of our parents, depending on how old they are, grew up in that civil rights era. But civil rights doesn't really look the same today as it did literally 51 years ago. It's not the same. And so now the term social justice is being coined as the term to kind of bring everybody together. And that pot is, black, brown, Hispanics, yellow, Asians. That pot is also the gay community. That pot includes other immigrants. So the pot that this encompasses is a little larger. Another part of it is, there are minority groups who don't want to be attached to the struggle or the plight of Black Americans. So how can we have an all-inclusive message when those who it would include don't want to be a part of that message?
I feel that there are some Black people who feel as if things that they're not affected by it, that it's over and done with, and that was then and this is now, and you should stop dwelling on things. And some people are just out of the loop, and that's just how it's going to be. But I don't feel that they shouldn't be given the opportunity to say, hey, you can be blind to the fact if you want to, but it does affect you.
I don't disagree. David, jump in here, sir.
Okay. So I guess what is the question or frame of the topic? Because I just feel like a lot of things got brought up, and I just want to know specifically, are we talking about organizing and mobilizing, or because you just mentioned a lot of things, so if I could just get in a nutshell.
Pick one. Have fun.
Part of me is going to play devil's advocate here, but then part of me.
Of course you are. Yeah.
Actually, but no, but I mean, really, I'm very cynical in the sense that I think at the end of the day, human beings are very tribal in their nature. That's what we are, and I think America, and I think this is something we have to accept, is that even in America, it's complicated because you can say, okay, we're a Black tribe, but then even in our tribe, there are differences. There's religious differences, there are geographical differences, and there's cultures within cultures, even amongst our own people. And what's clear to me is that if you look at the entire national problem, you have a tribe, as in white America, that is in charge or runs most institutions. I think anytime you have an institution where it is homogenous and it is the same people of the same background running it, you're going to run into certain biasness and a certain sort of, you're going to be, because if it's one think and too many people not critically disagreeing or coming from different backgrounds, you're going to make the same sort of views on things. And I think part of the problem is there's too many, frankly, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant men in charge of major institutions. And that's why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing today. And if there was, and frankly, not enough people of various backgrounds running these groups or institutions, like the police. I mean, frankly, in the police force in St. Louis is basically, it's 90% white, and they're policing an area that is predominantly Black. And I think when you have something like that, you have real problems. Like NPR has been writing a series of articles that have been really great about following this, and it follows sort of poverty and how the criminal justice system really affects and incarcerates a lot of people in poverty or gives them petty fines and things. And in this particular case, the police force has 80% of the people that get fines, tickets, anything are black, whereas 20% are white. And again, going back to what I said before, I just think really until we have more multiculturalism from the top, it's going to be hard to really change things at the bottom. I guess to sum it all up.
I don't disagree with you, but this is the problem. Numbers without money equals headache. I'm going to use the Nation of Islam as an example here. It is very clear whenever you see the Nation of Islam on television, you see them having a protest or an assembly, it is a lot of them, probably millions here in America. The debatable issue here is whether or not they have power. Will we ever see a change in America if black people don't have a seat at the tables of power? It all equates down to money. For the most part, when we're looking at who has the ability to change certain things that are going on, who has the jobs, who builds the hospitals, who writes the rules and laws governing the hospitals, who decided to privatize prisons, who are the trustee members of the colleges and universities that are admitting or not admitting our students, who writes the questions for standardized tests. Like, it ain't me. One of y'all doing that? Oh, and I say that comically, but we're not sitting at seats of power. And even if we did have a seat on a board, on a commission, we were an appointed official to serve in some capacity. What would our abilities look like in that situation? Like, numbers without money equals headache. Like, that's my opinion. You may disagree, but I think it's been proven there have been so many groups in America who have had, if not millions, hundreds of thousands of people supporting them and behind them. But have they seen victories? Like, have they seen victories? I mean, and that's really the question here. I guess we're asking questions that we really can't answer, because what can we really do about the job situation here in America? What can we do about the cradle to prison pipeline? What can we do about the war on drugs in our communities? And all of the inefficiencies related to just those small things. Those are three really large areas, or three small areas in the grand scope of things, but very huge parts of the problems that affect our community.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up with something. I think even in America, if you look at things globally, for the last 200, 300, 400 years, what nations have had the most wealth? It's been Western Europe, and then eventually the United States have predominant, and it's still that way, and it's been that way for a really, really long time. And if you look at things in America, I don't think a whole lot has really, this is why I'm cynical, has really changed. I mean, small things have changed in the grand scheme of things, and even these small things are quite big, like being able to vote, getting rid of Jim Crow. A lot of things are been very vital, but at the same time, it's the same people in charge. It's the same countries that have most of the nation's wealth. So I don't know. It hasn't changed in the last 200 to 300 years. Is that going to change in the next 20 to 30 years? I don't know. I just don't think so. And I mean, I hope so. I hope, but I'm just very cynical. I think you see things like this. We had Katrina which was terrible. We wanted to see a lot of change there, but has New Orleans changed? From what I understand, it's gotten worse. So, you know, what I know that we talk, these things happen, they're sad, that I hope that this does change some type of social mobility, but if you look at history, it doesn't. So I don't know if this is some, you know, I think this is part of my kind of question to the group. Is this a flash in the pan type of thing, or are we just going to talk about this for about a few more weeks, and then we move on to the next thing?
Well, if I could cut in, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
As I do that. Well, I think that beyond the bigger, I'll call them marquee issues, because those are the biggest ones. I think the two most important things at the surface that I think this conversation started with is how do we deal with the administration of policing and the perception of policing in this country. In fact, in this evening's Washington Post, there was an article about a sheriff's deputy outside of D.C. Who was caught on video choking, a white officer choking a white suspect, who was immediately fired within hours of this video and the photos being released by the Daily Mail and put on their website. And that all happened because of the perception of the gravity of the situation. The guy was being arrested for DUI. But when you see these still images turn into GIFs, people perceive, oh, that poor guy, he must have had a hard time, despite the fact that there was an actual situation forming there. The guy, you can't tell whether the guy was fighting or all that stuff, but the perception of that is, we had to deal with that situation right then. Substantive, decisive action followed. That perception is not clearly what we're dealing with here. It's not the same. And so in how we form our decisive pieces of action, whether it's education, protest rallies, whatever, we have to ensure that whatever we do, and of course those actions won't totally come out of this discussion tonight, but we have to create small steps towards dealing with that. And I think in dealing with how citizens on the ground approach their city councils and their public service commissions about how police officers are chosen and then held accountable, that then perception will change over time. And in a cynical way myself, that takes time, decades, years, whatever to do, but it can only start when people start to see really deliberate changes in how police work is viewed and managed on a governmental level. So I feel that we got off the road a bit, and so I think we should start there and work our way to what our action should be.
Okay. So I left in a panel by a local or regional NAACP group tonight, and there were 8 police chiefs. What's the plural? I don't know. 8 of them on a panel. Y'all laughing at me? I took an English class in a long time. 8 on the panel, and then there was a state human resource department official. Was there people like the state EEOC? They were there represented. Let's talk about the color on the panel. So the chair lady of the forum facilitator, president of the local NAACP, she was black, and then to diversify the group, that was all white male and probably over the age of 45, all of them. Probably older than that, but there was one that I know was in his 40s, but they were kind of older. And then they had a veteran police officer who, was the king of community policing in the area. He was there too. And of course, everything he said, all the people in the audience clapped for. Like what he said was making sense. So what bothered me was that in the minds of the people there, the answer was, well, we need black cops. Wow. That should, have any of you all ever dealt with a black cop? Might might have been a little bit worse. just just saying, they have some real chips on their shoulders. Not all of them, you know. I know people gonna see this and blow that out of proportion, but a few that I've dealt with have had some chips on their shoulders. So the question was asked, you know, because in real life, if we're honest here, maybe outside of Atlanta, Brittany, so you can identify with this. But the rest of us, I think Ferguson, Missouri can be dope. The city of Ferguson and the state of Missouri can be interchanged with almost any other city and every other state in America. I'm from Aiken, South Carolina, and we actually have diversity on our police force. But in the grand scheme of things, percentage-wise, it may not be as diverse as it could be. Okay, so wherever we are in America, let's put our hometown and our home state in place of Ferguson, Missouri. 3 black police personnel out of 53. Devastating percentage. Horrible percentage. But that could be every other or any other city in America. And so in the minds of the folks at this forum tonight, the answer was getting black police officers. And so then they asked, well, why don't we have any black cops? Okay, well, black cops, just like black doctors and really good black attorneys and great black college professors, are hot commodities. You know, surprisingly, being a black policeman can be very beneficial to someone, and they could go almost anywhere across America and get a really great salary, live in a very nice community, have their children go to really great schools, and, you know, not be in cities where, you know, their life may be in as much danger, and they're a hot commodity. Just like, you know, being a smart black young man, you can probably go to an Ivy League university for free. Who would have thought? Those kind of things happen. So then they talked about, you know, well, you should go to HBCUs and recruit. And then the chiefs talked about how their police departments were, some of them were civil service agencies, and they had, according to the civil service laws and regulations, that they had to, you know, yield to hiring veterans. Well, I know black people that have been in Iraq and Afghanistan and Kuwait and Desert Storm and Vietnam and the Korean conflict and all of those things. Like, it's not like there's a lack of black people in the military either. So what is y'all take on that? Because I'm just a little confused at the simplicity behind the thought that if we hire more black cops, then we won't have these problems in our community. I'm not silly enough to believe that that's the case, and I'm not saying that if we hire black cops it's going to be worse. I'm not saying that by any means. But what I am saying is it's not as simple as hiring a black cop. That's not going to stop crime, number one, and it's not going to stop the issues or the mistrust that the public has with the people who are paid to serve and protect them.
Well, I could see where they could make that argument just to try to pacify the issue of, okay, it's a white cop and it's black kids. If it's a black cop, then, you know, maybe that'll change that whole, oh, it's a race thing. You're a different race than me. You don't like me. You know, it's your people did that to you. So it'll change the argument. You know, it'll make a whole different it'll make it a whole different issue. It's like it wasn't us thing. So I can see where they're coming from with that. You know, it's ignorant. You know, you can't just, you know, okay, you're black, we're gonna just hire a whole bunch of black people, so you can't say we killing y'all anymore, kind of thing. No, it's not gonna work. But I can see why they would say that, to try to make it to where, you know, the blame is off of a different race. And because I see a lot of white commenters, even my friends and things, you know, they're trying to say, you know, it's not race, it's not about that, it doesn't have anything to do with that. So, you know, for those people who feel that that's not it, then having more black cops and the black cops doing the things that, white cops are doing, then maybe that'll just change it up. But for that to happen and for them to think it's just gonna, I don't know what they're gonna get out of that. I don't see how I don't think that's gonna work at all.
And it doesn't work. I'm from a hometown where it's the exact opposite. I grew up in Helena, Arkansas, where 95% of the cops were black. The chief of police was black. For quite a while, the majority of the city council and the mayor was black. And say, I'm not sure if folks were, I think it was maybe 3 years ago now. There was a massive FBI investigation called Operation Delta Blues, where a quite a large number of folks working in the police department, patrolmen, desk people, and otherwise, were arrested and indicted on trafficking drugs through the city. And over a period of time, you had a concerted effort of police officers and drug dealers working together to make this drug enterprise work. And we had a lot of the same discussions. Who are these people that we're hiring? What is the expectation of folks once they pass the police academy, that they're going to come home and do exactly what their shield and the slogan on their cars that we rented from some internet company said that they're supposed to do. I think that was lost on people, and so once the city finally put together a civil service commission, which we had never had, or we had not had at least in about 25 or 30 years, our city began to tackle that head on. So the expectation was set much higher, and I think that officers lose that somewhere in their end game of just getting home off their shift. And as stressful as being a police officer is, and I come from a family of law enforcement folks, so I'm not just making blind statements here, you have to find the balance between your mantle that you've been asked to uphold and who you're doing it for. And you may not think of your city or things would do that, but would you want something like that to happen to your son or your daughter or your mom or your dad or people that you feel are close to you in a familial or close or some other type of way? And I just don't know where the mental disconnect is there. That's certainly not a question that we can answer. It's one I will leave that to the philosophers. But I think that that's one of the issues that we're dealing with, is that the public, in somewhere in our mistrust, where the police has failed the public, we have failed the police too, somewhere. And I think once we get to that place along the way where the mistrust left, we'll find what it is. That the public as a body has done that has caused confusion that's turned into bloody carnage. It's just hard to wrap the mind around.
Oh, so let me, Courtney, you jump back in here. And again, thanks for being on with us tonight. So this is my question with everything that we've talked about. So I'm a praise and worship leader at church. Hallelujah. And when we teach praise and worship classes and workshops and things, they tell us, this is a sign of surrender. God, I surrender. I'm waving a white flag. So in America, we teach people, this is a sign of surrender. Freeze, put your hands up, and I do it. So whether I'm in church, oh God, I love you, thank you for being with me and loving on me and sending your son to die. Or whether the police is looking at me and is like, hey, freeze, put our hands up. So what I want to understand, because this year alone, we've had someone be killed with what is a baton? Is that what they call them? The billy stick, billy club, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We've had this young man Michael Brown, who hands in the air. In Augusta, Georgia, my hometown area, We had a person, get killed who was in handcuffs, laying on the ground, and he shot, like in handcuffs, face down on the ground, handcuffs behind his head, on the cement, and he gets shot anyway. Like, I'm a little confused. Like, what do we teach our young boys? Because my family taught me to walk away from a fight, because I know it's hard to believe, but when I was younger, I was really skinny. And my family taught me to walk away from fights. However, what they also taught me was that if you can't walk away, like if you try to walk away and, they're cornering you and you can't, get away, you don't just curl up and lay there and let them kick you and stomp you. You fight back. So I'm inclined to teach my younger siblings, or to tell young kids who I mentor and that I, serve as a big brother to defend themselves. Like, if the police are there to protect them and they're doing what the officer says do, I have my hands up. I've gotten on my knees. I'm not talking. I'm letting you violate my rights, because you shouldn't be searching my car anyway. You can't just walk up in my house and do what you want to do. You're violating my rights anyway, but I'm allowing you because my family have told me, that I need to be careful in the way I talk to you all and deal with you all, because if you say something, the police does something, you say something, and if they don't like the way you say it, they just shoot you. Like, that's the mindset that's in the black community right now. What are we supposed to tell our kids? What are we supposed to teach our kids right now? Because if you gonna get killed anyway, most people would think, well, I might as well fight. If I'm gonna die anyway, I might as well, die with some dignity. Not that that's the message that we need to be putting out there, but that's clearly something that we have to think about right now. What are we supposed to tell our kids? Like, what is Representative Curtis supposed to tell the young people in his district right now?
That's a very loaded question. What I'll say is I've had 2 run-ins with the police that those very same situations, and it's kind of disheartening, really. 2 weeks ago, I was pulled over. They said my tail light was out, and then they ran my name, and then they said the tail light was back on. So, I mean, that's just a run-in as a state rep, as an unidentifiable one at that. And then a couple of years ago in Kansas City, I was sitting on my trunk working on a business plan, and they sent 3 officers out and tried to, search my car, and I knew my rights, told them they couldn't, but they tried 4 or 5 times before the senior officer finally said, you can't do it. So, I mean, I really can't say, but I mean, it is institutionalized, and that's why the numbers alone won't change it, because, I mean, there's things that are, that are just built into these institutions that need to change over time. If you look at it, the education system is different, but the way that they handle situations with us is virtually the same, in the sense that if they don't know how to deal with you, they either suspend you or they put you in a situation where you get arrested or something like that. So, I mean, we need to cooperate on one side, but, at the point where, your rights are violated, you have to know them. And if you can articulate that, I mean, I'd like to say hopefully the situation will work out. And most times it does, but, those circumstances where it doesn't, that's the scary part, so that's why I can't truly just say, just cooperate, because you find yourself in a situation where you're surrendering and then they kill you. I mean, that's not a good situation we want to put anybody in.
David, you have had some interesting experiences being mixed or biracial. What's your take on that? Like, what would you, if you had children right now, like, what would you tell your son right now? And let's say, like, people couldn't look at your child and tell that, people can't look at you and tell that you're mixed. They think you're like, Hispanic or something. So, what is your mother supposed to say to you right now?
I think it's always a good general rule of thumb. If anybody has a gun, you do what they say. Given a situation, you just have to. I mean, it's tricky, and I think with a lot of these things, really, you can't paint it with a brush. I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, right? I mean, we don't know the full extent of what happened. They're still looking into it. The FBI is looking into it in Ferguson. So once we have those details, hopefully we'll have a better sense of what's going on. But I mean, there's been a number of instances that you mentioned, but there's also that incident with that gentleman in New York who was pulling out his passport and he got shot 41 times. That happened about, I don't know, it was a long time ago, like 10, 12 years ago, but still. So you know, what do you tell your kids? Just be careful, you know, be respectful, you know, just abide by the rules. I mean, and be polite. And I don't think there's really an answer to it. I don't. I think you just have to use your best judgment. And in schools, they should. Maybe it would help if there was some type of universal sort of safety thing. If a police officer says freeze, then that means you put up your hands like this and sit down. I don't know. Maybe that would help. But I just think in life's complicated and these situations aren't necessarily easy. So I don't know what the answer is really.
But that's the thing. Like, we're doing that. Like, that we're doing it. This is what he did. Like, for real. This is what he did. I mean, everyone can go to YouTube right now and watch the actual footage of the young man who got killed in Fruitvale Station. He was on his knees. I'm honestly confused as to what to tell our babies. You know, it's amazing. We have all of these people protesting at abortion clinics. You know, they want to protect the rights of a baby who's not made it to life and got to breathe its first breath of air with its lungs. But no one wants to protect the rights of our babies who are living and walking and breathing right now. I think that is absolutely ludicrous that no one is concerned. No legislation is being written to protect our babies.
Hold on. Well, I mean, here's the thing, and this is just what I would say. Maybe, I mean, this is me just thinking sort of out the box. Why does a police officer necessarily have to have a weapon that's going to kill somebody? You know, what if your average foot patroller, and this is again, maybe this is me being crazy, had rubber bullets instead? You know, so it just severely wounds somebody. It doesn't necessarily kill them. But granted, if they're in a situation ahead of time and they realize that they need to use deadly force, or it's an area where it's known that criminals have assault weapons and things of that nature, then yeah, they have access to that. But if you're in an area that's less likely for something like that to happen, maybe they don't need to have you know, regular assault weapons. Again, this is me just thinking, sort of just off the cuff, throwing it out there. But maybe that could be one solution to it. Or
go ahead, Brittany. Go ahead.
I think we just need to be made more knowledgeable. I know I was watching some network, and he was talking, maybe it was CNN, but he was talking to a guy who wrote a book. I don't know what the book is, but he was a former cop, and he was saying how I forgot the other guy's name, who died, and he had got on a higher ground, and he was like, that means that the police officer, he's fearing for his life. You're getting eye level with him. He's afraid for his life. The guy, he supposedly had a knife anyway, but you know, it was just an instance of him doing something that the cop saw as, you know, it's a life or death situation right now. You're gonna die, pretty much. If we're made aware of those things, that, you know, if not to do, because I feel like it's nothing that we really can do that we aren't already doing. You know, as far as following the rules and putting your hands up and being careful and being respectful, those are things that you know, whether you do it or not. You know, when I get pulled over, I'm not the nicest person in the world. I'm not, you know, whether I know that I'm speeding or not, I'm still going to be upset because I'm like, why are you pulling me over? Don't give me a ticket. I'm not saying this, but I'm thinking in my head. So, I mean, you know how to act, but it's whether you're doing it or not. You know, that's a different story. But it's a matter of whether they have the real bullets, like David was suggesting, them having the rubber bullets possibly. But they have the resources to kill you. So if you know that they have these things, what is it that I can do to prevent myself from being killed? I need to be more knowledgeable of what you feel is a wrong move. What am I doing? That's really all that you can do, because you have the police that are so protective, and it's their job, and it's just more of a, they're gonna get away with it. That's the way I'm thinking, and maybe it's the wrong way to think, but that's what it is. It's he say, she say, and I would be the person that's dead, so I can't say a thing. And they're gonna say, that they did the right thing, and you got their police force and all the people who love cops. They're all, cheering them on, and you got them rallying and everything else. So, I just think if we're more knowledgeable of what they feel is a threat, just to add that to the list of things not to do. Just make a do not list. Give it to every baby born with a birth certificate. Do not do this. So you won't die. And if you just make it more public knowledge, I think that'll be of some help.
And again, I'm not, trying to be the butthole here. If you want to join the conversation, please, use hashtag we respond, and we'll try to get your questions answered before we get off. But I'm just not satisfied with that. Like, I'm not satisfied with the fact that you can do what you're being told and you're still whatever. Like, right. It's still whatever. One of the chiefs of police tonight that was there is a part of some police chief agency, and he's the person that decides in this particular area that I'm in. He decides which use of excessive force or use of deadly force cases are justifiable. He told us, he said, well, I make those decisions here in this area. All the departments, in this region, they come to my desk. I make those decisions. In what world is that okay? Like, how am I supposed to trust your judgment? Who are you for me to trust your judgment? It's just, there's so much, and it was like every question that was asked, there was this little smart aleck response, like, what are you going to do about it? Like, this is it. This is how it is. The law was on my side. I'm connected with the people who write the laws. So, what are you going to do about it? That's the kind of mindset. That's what I took from it. And we're supposed to be fine with that. Like, we're supposed to be fine with everything that happens. You shoot my son. There's nothing I can do because I can't even afford to bury my child, and I can't afford a good attorney, and I'm supposed to be fine with that. And if I sue you, I lose my job because my boss. Like, I'm confused. But really, I'm not even upset with them, because there are some things that you expect from the people who appear to be against you. There are some things that you expect. But flipping this back on Ferguson, the things that kind of tick me off are, there's a website. Most of us who are in politics or do any type of community organizing, we are very familiar with websites like ActBlue, Rally.org, GoFundMe, Kickstart, those things like that. So there was a GoFundMe page, 2 for Ferguson. 1 to supply some of the organizers and protesters with food and water and supplies out there in the area. And then there was another for to raise money for the legal fees for the officer who shot and killed Michael Brown. So the page for the officer, I believe his name was like Officer Wilson or Officer Warren or something like that, raised over $235,000. Over $235,000. The page for the protesters who are there, in response to the death of this young teen who had surrendered, raised slightly over $10,000. So, like, my issue right now isn't even with that incident. My issue is the lack of care, the lack of compassion that's in the Black community about the things that are happening in our community. Like, how dare us? Like, how dare us get upset and want to go, go protest and not have the backs of the people who are protesting on our behalf, people who are concerned about our own children. Like, how dare us? But then we get upset that this officer is not arrested. This officer, gets off scot-free, but we don't care enough to do anything about it. We don't care enough. Go ahead, jump in.
If I could, so it's a couple of different GoFundMe pages out there. One actually raised $100,000 for the Mike Brown Memorial. There's another that raised $25,000 for a scholarship fund. But you have so many people trying to capitalize off of this that it's a number of accounts. If you look up everything for Mike Brown, it's over at least $140,000. But there wasn't a concerted effort just because some people just do this, and come in and try to take advantage of it. So there are larger donations, but it wasn't for a specific purpose, in the memorial and the scholarship fund.
But even with that, that's $140,000, like compared to $235,000. And I'm glad that someone donated something. But I don't get the concept of us not supporting the efforts of our community. Like, it doesn't make it. At some point, like, we have to step up to the plate. At some point, that's just my opinion.
And to bring even more gravity to it, actually, there's multiple Wilson pages too, and together those pages have actually raised a little over $600,000 as of today. There were several news articles about that in the late part of the day there. So you're really dealing with a situation where we're not even in an ideal world with this, but you have a gentleman who has not formally been charged, is still getting paid, has no real expenses at the moment. And you're right, it is the folks that are supporting of him are very much thinking like an ant. Let's get ready for the winter. Winter is coming here, and let's prepare for whatever comes. I think that there's still some collateral behavioral mindsets about how we deal with fundraising in advocacy. We just haven't dealt with that, especially when it comes to Black advocacy, whether it's a situation like this or other marquee issues that Black advocacy groups and the like deal with. So I think beyond that, I don't know how you teach people how to raise money, and I'm a fundraiser by profession, and it's when I train people in conferences and workshops and that, people are like, well, why don't we want to give? In our society, and I think we all know this, people don't always like to give and things because we don't like to be sold. That's just the nature of our society. And even with the critical mass that this situation has reached, folks aren't able to step outside of that a lot of the time and see the need outside of their wiring of being sold or being bamboozled in a situation where they're not.
I think that's essentially it, because in real life you can't trust. You don't know who to donate to. Like, you don't know who to send your money to. You don't know who to send your goods to if you're donating, like clothes or water or whatever. Because for the most part, people are trifling. Let's just put it out there. People are trifling. The fact that there are multiple pages, there's no guarantee that any of the money that's being raised, whether it's for the Michael Brown side or Officer Wilson side, is going to make it to the places that these people are saying that they're representing, or that the money will go to. There's no guarantee. And I think that's the sad part, in the age of the internet, everybody's a spokesperson, everybody's a community activist, and everybody is a passionate, member of the community, because, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter told them that they were. Anyone can, you launch a good blog and you have a nice logo, you're now a media mogul. You can go viral in 10 minutes. So that's just the world that we live in. So I do understand the concept that people don't want to be bamboozled. I mean, because you have legitimate organizations that bamboozle people. You have legitimate organizations that are going to be raising money, but Michael Brown's family will never see that money. I mean, like we know the history, civil rights organizations, and the way things have been in the past. Things don't always get to where they're supposed to be. I'm not saying that that's the case right now, but we understand that concept, so we do understand why there's a lack. But at the end of the day, Black America has to start being responsible for Black America. That's what it boils down to. If you don't trust one of the internet, sites, I don't blame you. Find a church to seed into out there in that area. Find an organization that's doing good work in that area. Do due diligence. Do your own research. Find a way to invest into the situation that happened with this young man. Like, you don't have to donate to one of these sites, but do your part. You need to do something. Like, at the end of the day, we have to start being responsible for our community. We talk about, the government and the things that they're not doing. We talk about all of our elected officials, from the local city council up the county council and county commission, regional government, the governor's office, state rep, state senate, our congressional representatives, our senators. We even talk about President Obama and the staff in the White House. We talk about everything that everybody's not doing with or not using their power correctly. But what are we doing to affect the lives of our community? Like, we're calling for open season on Black America to end. But what are we really going to do about that? Like, individually. We can have all of the YouTube sessions that we want, and I'm so glad that we're doing this again. We can write all of the blogs, and we can issue all of the beautiful statements, and we can do all of the conference calls. But if the people in the community aren't willing to pick up their bed and walk towards a new future, or walk in a new direction for Black America or Black people in the United States of America, everything that we're planning, and every other group of young people, every other person who's a part of the talented 10th out there, like, we're not the only ones. The Black Caucus and Black Progressives are not the only ones having these conversations. Like, these conversations are going on all across America right now. But if the 10% of us that are having these conversations can't find a way to infiltrate the minds of the other 90%, everything that we've done is going to be in vain, and we will continue to see the Jordan Davises and the Trayvon Martins and the Michael Browns, who are our current day, our modern day Emmett Tills. This is nothing but history repeating itself, and we're in the same position that we were then, except the difference is our grandparents were willing to die for their right to vote, and they still vote to this day. Our grandparents are willing to die for a good job in a home in a decent neighborhood, and the opportunity to eat pie or get a glass of milk and sit in a restaurant. But is our generation willing to do that? Those are my questions to you all, and I know y'all can't answer those. So let's go ahead and give up some closing statements, because we could be on here all night talking about these things. We'll start with Representative Curtis, then we will go to Brittany, David, and then Dan.
I mean, it's definitely a lot of things that we have to look at going forward. I will say that the young people that I've talked to over the past 2 weeks that are out there, a lot of them are willing to die, I mean, to change this situation. So, I mean, that's a good and a bad thing. It's bad that it came to this, but I mean, at least that they're united enough, to fight against something that's seemingly unjust, and I agree with that. But I mean, we're going to have to hold our leaders more accountable. A lot of the older, established political people that we have in organizations, I don't know that they're up to the task, and I don't know that they've respected the young people or brought them along enough in order to take on the fight or continue the fight. I mean, it's 50 years since, the Civil Rights Act and a number of other things, and we're still fighting for some of the same things because we got to a point where, we were comfortable with the progress we made, but that wasn't really progress to a lot of people. So we definitely have to take up the mantle and keep pushing forward, and hopefully, if nothing else comes out of this, the young people will get to a point where we're not going to, wait for the older generation to bring us along, but we're going to start pushing for more change for us and for the young people behind us, because it's our future.
I definitely feel that the young people inherit the revolution. There's so many people that I know my age um, that we're ready and willing to do what it takes. There's enough young people, I feel, and that we are, and I guess it all depends on your group and who you hang out with. But I know that there are many who they haven't been very interested in politics, and my family hasn't been very much either. But it takes that one person to get them involved in what's really going on, and letting them know that yeah, you can watch the news. Some people don't watch it; it's not entertaining, but it's just so you can know exactly what's going on within your community. Show them how important it is, and be that one person to get your family to go and register to vote. There's so many differences that I've been able to make thus far, and being able to just um, make it to whereas my younger cousins value these things, and how our older family has shown us, exactly what they've gone through. And so I think it just takes one person at a time and just infiltrating all of these various communities. And that I don't think that it's just going to be a one more week, 2 more weeks of this. I think we can really keep it going. And I think there can be some longevity to this. And I think that's what's really most important, that the cause is not lost, that we don't lose focus of what really needs to happen as far as police reform, whether you spoke about civil rights and now it's social justice, that, that we keep it going. And I really think that there's enough people, us as well as all of those who are having these conversations, that can really make sure that this conversation keeps going, because it's going to take a while for it to actually change. But I am optimistic about that change.
Okay. No, I think for me, what I'll say is I think it's important, one, that we start having these discussions, and that I'm glad that there's been the my big issue has been criminal justice reform and reform on the war on poverty. I think the current criminal justice system preys on the weakest in society, and I don't think it's necessarily a black issue. I think it's a socioeconomic one. Those that are at the current lowest part of the totem pole in our society and are the ones getting preyed upon by the criminal justice system. And I've been for an event to happen that would be a catalyst to really bring this to the forefront of the national discussion, and it's happening right now, and that's exciting. I just hope it continues, but I think there's encouraging. It hasn't gone away in a few weeks. It just seems that I hope people stay fired up. But again, if you look at history, I mean, when Sandy Hook happened, there was a lot of push for stronger gun regulations. It didn't happen. But the American system is just very difficult to change, and it takes a very long time to do so, and we just have to keep working at it, and it's not a short-term fix. So, but I think all the pieces are there, and I hope that this does turn into that people get organized, and we do see some real change on the national scale. And I look forward to working with everybody on this panel and Rashad and the BlackCaucus to make sure that it does happen. But I do think part of what we have to do when we take on this task is realize that it is a daunting one, and it's not going to be very easy. And as fired up as people are now, there's going to be a big issue that's going to happen in a few weeks, and people are going to start talking about that, and this won't be the big national discussion anymore. And we just have to keep people as mobilized and passionate about it as if it just happened. So.
Awesome. This has been a phenomenal discussion that really just scratches the surface of what we all know to be humongous systemic issues with how we live and try to thrive and survive in this country. And a book that came to mind that I read about 6 or 7 years ago called The Fortress of Solitude, by Jonathan Lethem, which is essentially a semi-autobiography of his growing up in Brooklyn in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And his friendship with a black teen named Mingus. And one thing that kind of came out of the book for me as we talked about the talk and what do we tell folks is at what age is a person period when they learn that they're considered scary or dangerous to folks that don't look like them. And when I think about what that means, especially now that I'm a parent, I look at this manifestation again of the systemic racism and brutality that we were conditioned, and that many rose-colored glass-wearing white Americans thought went away sometime in 1972, never to come back again. And using a Disney reference, because I've been using a lot of Disney references lately, it's a lot like when Hades and Hercules went to release the Titans from their prison. They had never gone away. They were just in this one place where people were conditioned to believe that they were safe. And when they were back, it's like all of a sudden it's time to be fearful again when the threat never actually went anywhere. And as a result, this summer of bloodshed and brutality has brought that to life for a lot of Americans, to the degree that people are like, oh, there's racism in this country. Hello, welcome to the party. I'm like, there's chips and everything for you. But on a serious note, we got snacks. But on a serious note, we have to keep the intensity up, like we said, but also, it's time to take these conversations to the halls of people that can affect and inform the change, because we can drive the vehicle only so far without the support of folks that can make these decisions. And now it's just coming down to, and starting in Ferguson and moving on elsewhere in Missouri and around the country, to begin removing those obstacles, i.e. people that don't get it, that don't have our vision of what our communities should look like, what our schools should look like, what feeling safe in that community should look like, and replace them with folks who do and are willing to learn if they don't.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being on tonight and sharing in the conversation. I know it was a little random, but it was still good. It was still good. But in my closing remarks, I just issue a challenge to everyone who sees this video tonight and who will see this in the future, and who have conversations like the conversation moving forward. It really is something that's going to be personal. It's going to be a conversation that you have with yourself when you lay in the bed at night, when you're working out, when you're walking around the track, when you're daydreaming at the office, when you're eating that Rice Krispie treat that you shouldn't be eating, when we're just doing us. The conversation should be have, what am I willing to do for my people? What am I willing to do for my family? What am I willing to do for myself? Those are the conversations that we need to be having. We're watching. Let me say this, and then I'm gonna get back into that. Having President Obama be elected was really important to me. Personally, I'm like Team Deval Patrick all day. But having President Obama be elected, seeing the first African American or person of Nubian descent or or from the African diaspora be elected as president of the free world, the United States of America, king of the Western Hemisphere. That was really important for me to see. When I was a kid, my grandma told me that I was a king. She told me that I came from kings and queens and that I was a king and that I was important, that I was going to be somebody and I was going to make my family proud and I was going to make my neighborhood proud and I was going to make my church proud and the city of Aiken was going to be proud and I was going to make the world a better place. Those are the things that my grandma told me. My grandma told me that. Everyone's grandparents didn't tell them that. Everyone's mom and dad didn't tell them that. And I believed my grandma. And then I went to college and I dealt with some things. And I dealt with things both from, from blacks and others. It wasn't just, you don't always only deal with racism. Sometimes we deal with, colorism and other forms of prejudice. When I was in college, I started gaining weight. I dealt with issues with that too. And then President Obama came along, and him being elected as president told me that I could make it in the world. I'm wondering what's not being said to other young black men across the country. Like what's not being said to other young black women across the country. Like what's going on in the mind? What's going on in the psyche? What are we gonna do as Black America that's going to propel us forward? Like that's the question to me. Like what can I do, being a young African American male under the age of 30, that will not just secure my future and make sure that I can take care of me and my family, but what can I do that's going to help all Black Americans and in turn help America as a whole? Like those are the questions that I'm having, and I challenge you, as you're watching through YouTube, Google Plus, Facebook, Twitter, and every other social networking stream. I challenge you to ask those questions to yourself as well. I issued a challenge to you to find out what you can do. Mobilize yourself. Everyone talks about rapid response in politics. You respond. How do you respond tonight? Tonight we use the hashtag #WeRespond. How will you respond to these issues in America? And how can we as a community secure our family? How can we secure our perimeter, our borders? Like how do we protect our children? How do we protect our wives and our husbands, our families, our churches, our businesses, our schools? These are the things that we need to be talking about. I don't wish for any other ethnic group to not be successful, but I definitely want to see my community in a better position and be seen in a better light. I pray, my prayer is that we never have to deal with any more Emmett Tills. I hope that we never have to deal with another Trayvon Martin situation, another Jordan Davis situation, another Mike Brown situation. I have younger brothers. I have younger siblings, younger sisters. I don't want this to happen to them, and I don't want this to happen to any other child, whether it be by police or anything else, and I also issued a call to end black-on-black violence. That's a subject we didn't get a chance to touch tonight, and we'll hit it really soon. We talk about, the issues with white policemen and black children, but we really didn't hit our gang violence and other black-on-black crime and violence. Those are things that we need to address. We also have to address domestic violence and other, disputes in the home. Fathers, if they're in the home, beating their wives, and mothers abusing children or fathers abusing children. So there's a plethora of conversations that we'll be having over the course of the next few weeks. But that's it tonight. Follow the Black Caucus on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter at BlackCaucus Yda. And again, Representative Curtis, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Hopefully we can have you on again. David, Brittany, and Dan, thank you again. I'm Rashad Gaines, Chair of the BlackCaucus for the Young Democrats of America, and thank you for listening.